Great. All right, here we go. So with that, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. And actually our speakers awesomely reached out to suggest this topic for discussion today. And upon speaking with them, I was struck by the similarities in the implicit and explicit expectations and duties for the role of the program coordinator of an NSF research traineeship. But similar to what we in our community of practice have noted, I was struck by the kind of similarities in the pluralities of the roles of our roles as interdisciplinary integration experts. And so I was hoping that we could use this as an opportunity to help each other clarify and develop our professions and co-learn best practices for doing both successfully. So our first speaker today is Nicole Scott, and she is the program coordinator for the Predictive Plant Phenomics, or P3, National Science Foundation Research Traineeship, or NRT. She's also the program manager for the USDA funded Agricultural Genome to Phenome Initiative. She holds a PhD in cognitive science from the University of Minnesota, and so she has firsthand experience in being an interdisciplinary trainee and all the wonderful challenges that come along with it. After Nicole speaks, we're going to have a brief pause for a couple of questions, and then we're going to move on to our next three speakers. The first is Jyothi Kumar Phd, and she's the program coordinator for the NRT Impacts at Michigan State University. And as a program coordinator, she's involved in the executive leadership team, internal evaluation, and curriculum development of interdisciplinary core courses. She's well-versed with administering programmatic requirements, securing funding for trainees, and negotiating budgets and facilitating training opportunities. Next, we'll move on to Kristin Brethova. She's currently the project manager for the Interdisciplinary Complex Networks and Systems NRT at Indiana University. She holds a Master's of Science in Environmental Science and Policy from the University of Chicago and bachelor degrees in Biology and Psychology from Indiana University. After Kristin, we're going to move on to Sara Mata, who is a research associate for the Vice President of Research and Partnerships at the University of Oklahoma. Dr. Mata previously served as the program coordinator for the Aeroecology NRT at Oklahoma and promoting interdisciplinary collaborations. Dr. Mata is dedicated to student support and broadening participation in STEM. And so after Jyothi, Kristin, and Sara, we'll have another quick pause for questions as we move through our webinar today. And we're going to finish up with Toccara Houston, who is the project coordinator for the NSF NRT ARMS traineeship at Georgia Tech. Her career encompasses more than 10 years in program administration, project management, and accreditation with higher education and medical education. She received her bachelor's of science in interdisciplinary studies with concentrations in English, philosophy, and religious studies at Tennessee State University. And we'll finish out the webinar today with some final questions and some synergizing remarks. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Nicole.
Great, thanks, Kristin. And thanks for giving us an opportunity to share this work. Okay, I'm going to do that annoying thing where I ask if everyone can see my slides. Are we good? Okay, great. So this presentation is part of a larger effort to provide an overview of the characteristics and roles filled by a program coordinator. As a central administrator, they are responsible for a wide variety of programmatic tasks, requiring them to be flexible and, quote, change hats throughout the day. Because of this, a program coordinator relies on key characteristics and skills essential to run the program, which we will describe today. Overall, our goal is to provide insight into this role by acknowledging the work we do. To start, I'd like to talk about who we are as professionals. And for this, I'd like to direct your attention to our listed degrees and professional titles. We have bachelor's, master's, and doctorate degrees, but we never stop learning. and we each bring our own experiences into this job and leverage these for the benefit of our trainees. Not one of us is better at our job than the others, and this is an important non-distinction for this position. Program coordinators can be successful regardless of their level of education or amount of experience. But this just makes it all the more difficult to describe who a program coordinator is and who to hire. For example, some of the PIs that I've spoken with have voiced concern over hiring a PhD for this position, like myself, presumably because they believe that person wouldn't enjoy the work enough to stay. In fact, I almost wasn't hired for this position because of my degree. However, I've spoken with other PIs who've delighted in hearing that PhDs currently hold these positions and that they hope too to hire someone like that. Then once someone is hired, their official title at their university can be any variety of titles, as you can see here, even though for us, the work is the same. We all refer to ourselves as program coordinators because this is the title that the National Science Foundation uses, and our programs are funded by them. This is a widely used job title in academia, particularly for graduate or research programs. So it only gets more confusing when trying to define exactly what a program coordinator is or does. But before laying this out and who will be successful in this role, I'd like to first explain what an NRT is so you can gain a better understanding of our experiences in this role. The National Science Foundation formed national research traineeships to encourage innovation and interdisciplinary sustainable graduate programs. These programs are designed to advance graduate education in emerging fields. So we are essentially guinea pigs for NSF and our university to figure out how to do this type of program in job training. We are quite literally inventing new processes, procedures, and products as we go. And we have about 5 years to accomplish this, which is just enough time to get things started. Then we have to figure out how to sustain the most successful elements of the program and institutionalize these at the university. And this is no small task. My own experience from being an interdisciplinary graduate student was great in terms of the exposure I received to many different disciplines and the research that becomes possible when you are trained to work outside your silo. However, my graduate program was in constant threat of closing because not one of the 3 colleges who had a stake in the program wanted to be responsible for it financially. And I was in the second cohort. This financial and administrative reality is a big challenge for interdisciplinary programs, and it's a challenge for NRTs. How do you create sustainable programs that don't cost anything additional to colleges? Each NRT program is funded at about $2 to $3 million over those 5 years. And this year alone, NSF expects to make 18 to 20 new awards. With the first awards given in 2015, those very first programs are now figuring out the sustainability aspect and implementing those at their institutions. So who is a program coordinator? Well, they are valuable members of a program or project team. But the role is often not well defined in the beginning stages of the program or project, which makes it difficult to create an accurate job description. In fact, the role is often much more than what ends up being included in the job description. So this is not a good indicator of who a program coordinator actually is or what they do. So is this role defined more by a person's skill set or their characteristics? We think so, and we'll spend the remainder of this presentation talking about which skill sets and characteristics make someone successful in this position. Again, the goal of our work is to point out that the role is often underestimated and there is often little discussion of how the role will change as the work advances. We have taken on the task of acknowledging the challenges and opportunities these roles present to both programs and the individuals who fill them. And even though this is from the perspective of program coordinators who operate NRT programs, we believe our experiences in finding the place and space to be interdisciplinary and build sustainable programming are applicable to any academic or research program. In thinking about our positions and how we manage our programs, duties, trainees, and faculty, we came up with 3 distinct components that have helped us be successful. Early in the implementation of our programs, we have relied on creativity to design, innovate, and drive change. Throughout the program, we have been depended upon to implement the actions that needed doing and predict what changes were needed. By the end of the program, we've leaned on and contributed to the networks within our universities and with other NRT programs to transition the most successful elements of our programs into sustainable activities. In addition to these 3 critical components, we've identified 9 key roles which we initially referred to as hats that we wear and change throughout the day. But for today, we'll just refer to these as roles. Before I hand things over to Jyothi, who will describe the creativity components and its roles of designer, innovator, and change agent, are there any questions? Okay. I think I'll hand it over to Jyothi.
All right, thanks, Nicole. So my role with the Impacts program started at the same time, and we were actually able to hit the ground running because I was involved in the beginning in setting up all the processes and policies by working very closely with the leadership team. It also helped that my interest in education research and teaching aligned really well with the program goals. Now, I will share the first critical component of a successful NRTPC, which is creativity. Creativity manifests in the role as a designer, focusing on the goals and being able to be intuitive while establishing processes. As an innovator, guiding initiatives to apply on a broader scale, and also serving as a change agent, both locally and within the institution and outside, more so in the global, outside of the institution. So the initial NRT proposal serves as a map to guide the foundation setting up of the program, especially in the first year activities, which involves curriculum development, recruitment materials, setting up policies, procedures, and more. The PC in the designer role needs to brainstorm opportunities for students and develop ways to implement new structures within the university. The example within our program has to do with establishing the NRT curriculum. So the design of the curriculum was set up within the proposal was meant to be synergistic. So there are 3 courses: the Foundations, Frontiers, and the Forum, as what they are called. Essentially, they are set up as connected to each other as a set. So it would actually help the students to take all these 3 courses. Now, the Forum is a professional development course, which provides an opportunity to design the course as needed from semester to semester based on the needs, focusing on different professional development goals. Now, the challenge about implementing new structures within the university is in that our program involves 3 colleges and 7 departments. So the 3 colleges are College of Engineering, College of Agricultural Sciences, and College of Natural Science. And there are 7 departments. So all of these departments and colleges have to approve for the new curriculum to be in place. And this is pretty common across NRTs because they all involve different colleges and different departments. And also, this process is time consuming. And while this process is happening, there has to be a stand-in course for the students who are already enrolled in the program to start taking the courses. So this just brings about very different challenges about implementing the courses and how the PCs play a significant role. Kristin will touch upon other aspects of implementing the aspects of different programs. As an innovator, focusing on developing new ways to train students outside the confines of the university's structure, the PCs in their role must be very creative and think outside the department silos, which is very typical of most universities. NRT programs in particular are awarded in recognition of their potential to address the big ideas, the global challenges. In accomplishing this, NRTs build upon existing learning and research infrastructure at their institutions to create a whole new set of educational standards for an emerging field. So going back to the curriculum example, making the NRT curriculum available to non-NRT students who are not within our program, this is really crucial in the long term to help sustain the courses beyond the NRT program. So advertising them and integrating them into the existing curriculum And finding innovative ways to do that is really important. One of the ways to also accomplish the sustainability of the curriculum is to establish a graduate certification. Again, this comes with its own challenge where it takes about more than a year to set up the whole thing, where all the colleges and departments have to approve for this to be a graduate certification. And this also in turn helps in accomplishing the goal of applying to a broader scale, which is being innovative. So we, as program coordinators, we need to continue to innovate as the program evolves. In the role of fostering educational standards, the PC, who manages change, leads change, and establishes policies, procedures, and activities, is also a change agent. Any interdisciplinary program is new and uncharted. So there are very limited existing models for the kind of highly interdisciplinary work for which the NRTs are designed. It is challenging and risky to work outside and also within the traditional silos that most universities are typically set up to be. The job of a change agent is to help minimize this risk and also to create a space where experimentation can actually happen and new ways of doing things can really thrive. Although the primary goals of most NRT programs is to create direct change through the students who go through the program, to the faculty involved in the programs, and also the research at the institutional levels. The other significant sort of indirect significant role is also that this be a model as a template and also which is replicable. So this should be the case for most graduate programs. So the PC can actually help connect as a bridge between the trainees who are going through the program and the leadership to help facilitate some of the changes that are being brought about, and also to help in creating this replicable model. So in my role as within the internal evaluation team, the importance of feedback from the trainees becomes very important. We do this through focus groups and surveys. And as we continue to work with the students, considering their feedback and helping establish some of these changes, which can be really positive, becomes very important. Sara and Takara will talk a lot more about evaluation in their sections. Now over to Kristin for the second component.
Thanks, Jyothi. So the second component consists of implementing and predicting the needs of the program. Within this, we've identified 3 roles, being a generalist or utility player, task keeping to ensure program efficacy, and acting as a forecaster to predict the needs of the program. As mentioned earlier, project coordinators fill many roles supporting the program, including HR, accounting and budget, program reporting and communication, including website, Twitter, newsletters, and more, acting as an academic advisor, keeping track of our students' progress, an administrative assistant, and event planning. With all of these responsibilities, the PC can be thought of as a utility player, taking effective and efficient steps in managing the program. So this includes the ability to transition flexibly between those disparate tasks throughout the day, but then also, as we all have roles in academia, throughout the academic year, as the needs of the program and the students are fluctuating throughout that time. Additionally, the NRT is the primary duty of the project coordinator, but is often secondary or even tertiary to other program stakeholders. Students and faculty have teaching and research responsibilities, staff who work primarily with other programs. However, in contrast, the PC is devoted full time to the success of the program. However, programs consistently underestimate the importance of the role and the time required to fill it. Because of this, a couple years into the NRT program, the National Science Foundation added a stipulation that the university hire someone who is at least 0.75 FTE to fill the role. Underestimating the role can lead to otherwise preventable transition and instability. I was hired, for example, halfway through our program because the previous person was only half-time and was unable to fill the needs of the program with that allotment. So while she left to fill those other roles, I was hired, and during a program that has only a 5-year run period, this obviously created a period of transition, which is going to be disruptive for any program. Because the program is the singular focus of the PC, they become the task keeper, helping ensure the program and trainee success. The PC becomes the go-to person for building and maintaining the program and its relationships across the campus, and eventually institutionalizing at least some of its elements. Sara will expand on this next in discussing the role as both a broker and a network node. But for now, the task keeper involves managing up, cultivating a productive working relationship with the leadership of the program, and establishing strong communications while also setting boundaries and clear agreed upon goals and expectations. The task keeper's focus involves completing tasks on their own and ensuring that others contribute to the goals as stipulated. A couple of examples from my own work include, especially as this is an interdisciplinary program, getting clear written agreements regarding what departments will pay for what and what responsibilities those departments each share and take on, especially given that those departments may have staffing changes of their own, and the next person's going to need documentation of what that program has promised. Another example is the annual report. So our NRT has 5 committees: evaluation, teaching and learning, admissions, and more. And so leading up to the annual report, it is important that I delegate out the relevant parts of the report to the chairs of these committees and clearly communicate what information I need from them and on what sort of timeline to make sure that we submit the report in a timely manner. It is important here to remember what should not be our role to take on. For example, I write in consultation with program leadership offer letters for our students, and they are sent and managed through the regular admissions office. There is a tendency among other staff and school leadership to come to me about everything related to our NRT program, even things like admissions that are not specific to our program. And so for the last 2 years running, after I posted the stipends for our students, the budget asked me for our students' offer letters to verify the expense. And I had to remind them that, like all other programs, those letters are on file with the admissions office. This is important because it's truly beneficial for everyone to integrate our program with the standards of the school as much as possible, while paving the way for different, more interdisciplinary studies and programs. So our programs are weird, but they're not that weird. And getting this point across is a way to sort of say or show that these sorts of programs are possible. Trying to get them to understand how our program works and take some ownership is further important, because if no one but the PC understands how the program works, that's a disadvantage as we move forward and try to institutionalize some elements of the program and think about the sustainability of the program after grant funding and funding for our own positions expires. By bearing the day-to-day responsibilities, PCs have the majority of interactions with trainees and help them anticipating students' needs. Predicting program needs is similar to forecasting, where the primary goal is to identify the full range of training possibilities, what might be beyond the certainties originally envisioned in creating the program and the role. Mapping out uncertainties and preparing for unforeseen circumstances to make decisions and necessary changes, PCs are crucial contributors to reflect, revise, and reassess program elements for students and the leadership team. For the leadership team to make timely decisions, they need evidence or patterns to indicate what steps need to be taken. Through regular, thorough assessments, a successful project coordinator recognizes patterns of effective strategies that can be shared with the stakeholders. A program coordinator's role is pivotal in being objective and open to new ideas and flexible in communicating those lessons and recommendations to the program members. I will now hand it over to Sara, who will talk about the next critical component, which is community.
Thank you, Kristin. The third critical component of a successful program coordinator is community. Within these components are 3 main foci: being a surveyor of the current climate, 2, serving as a broker, 2, fostering collaborations, and 3, acting as a network node. To inform the forecaster, a program coordinator needs to gather data by surveying how well the program is meeting expectations and fulfilling trainees' educational needs. Evaluation and assessments of the programs are conducted internally by the program coordinator, and in most scenarios, externally by a group of professional evaluators. To gather a more complete perspective of programs, impact, and successes, program coordinators facilitate gathering components from contributing stakeholders to provide insight to fully evaluate aspects of the effectiveness. centering the voices of the trainees, building a rapport and maintaining connections with trainees on a regular basis ensures shortcomings are recognized early and necessary improvements are quickly addressed. As a conduit for feedback between trainees, faculty, and the leadership team, a program coordinator acts as a broker to negotiate and advocate for the suggestions that come out of the surveys and other forms of feedback. In addition, a program coordinator actively seeks new connections with the purpose of building collaborations across departments and disciplines to promote interdisciplinary and learning outside of the core field of study. It is vital to the success of the program coordinator to capitalize and foster these connections to promote the efforts of working across the silos. This shed lights on how the program coordinator is also a network node. The network node aspect of the program coordinator's role created positive relationships which lead to ever-expanding professional networks that are an important source of information, direction, advice, and ideas and innovation. For example, a network of NRT program coordinators formed within the first year of the program's inception, which allowed for various NRTs to share promising practices pertaining to recruitment and retention, as well as logistics such as forms and required documents for NSF, among other advice. What began as a way to build community and allow sharing of resources has quickly turned into a self-improvement engine for the NRT program as a whole. In fact, the network of NRT program coordinators inspiring each other collaborated to form the content of this presentation. After surveying the current and future needs of students and brokering connections, it is clear program coordinators are important network nodes. Often the initial contact of the program coordinators receive information from outside and within the network and pass on to the appropriate channels. Faculty provide the link to connections and partnerships. However, it is the program coordinator who matches students to available opportunities. With the many roles of a program coordinator, they are endowed with a unique perspective, which prepare them for balancing the levels of uncertainty and trending the unfamiliar territory, which may lead to challenges. This next slide will give you an overview of the various ways in which the NRT program coordinators have built the community. As I mentioned, it started early on when the program coordinators, the NRTs were initially formed, and since then has built up into an incredible group of network. And I'm excited to see that there are many who are attending in this meeting. So just to give you an overview, they meet every first Friday of the month. There's information on the Google Docs that have provided forms and other promising practices mentioned. A Slack channel that is active for questions, and then providing a listserv to get in contact and stay connected with the program coordinators. And it's also been a mechanism to provide recruitment opportunities for students, especially those NRTs that have similar backgrounds and are in particular fields to share resources with students who might be potentially coming in. And obviously collaborations for conference presentations. This publication that Nicole will mention a little bit more. And as I mentioned at the end of my, to share the challenges that Takara will now go over.
Hi, I'm Takara from Georgia Tech with the ARMS program. And so today I'm going to talk to you about a few of the challenges that we may come across while we are the program coordinator for these NRTs. The first is the classification of the program coordinator institutionally, and that is, how are we defined on campus? So some of the questions that I've asked myself in this role is, what do I have access to? And do we have someone in a similar role? And these things come up in, say, for example, steering committee meetings where you're trying to find someone who has the same job title as you, but the job responsibilities are different. And then you realize that, oh, it's just you, but the closest thing you have to you is maybe a director or a chair or an associate director or so forth. So I think that sometimes it's hard to understand what our role is as far as, are we doing the budget? Are we a part of the admissions process? Who does our marketing? We don't necessarily have access to all these things, so we have to do it ourselves. And it can be a little challenging initially when you're hired as to come in as the program coordinator into this program, to thinking you're just going to coordinate things, you're going to plan meetings, you're going to interact with the students, but you're doing everything. And that also includes the advising and the financial aid and making sure they have housing to some degree if they decide to live on campus, or to give them recommendations. It's so many different components to this particular role. And I think institutionally, they have a hard time trying to identify with us. The next challenge is, where do we fit in the department structure? So I'll use me for an example. I am in robotics. However, I am technically in electrical and computer engineering, but my PI is in College of Computing. So it's, where do I fit? How am I prioritized? I'm in between 3 departments, but really my department is robotics. So I mainly support robotics. Occasionally there is some ECE stuff that I have to take care of, and I don't touch the College of Computing. But this becomes an issue when you're trying to get things paid, or you're trying to get all your faculty together, because this program is interdisciplinary. I think that was previously mentioned. And it's like, where do we fit in? How are we prioritized in all of this? Sometimes we can be overlooked because it's usually just one person or maybe 2 people. And sometimes it's a full-time person, and sometimes it's a part-time person and they have another job. We have to understand that we kind of have to make our own path in this and kind of be like, this is what I do. So for me, in order to understand where I fit in, I would attend staff meetings probably for all 3 departments, just to say, hey, I'm here, but I'm not here, and kind of to kind of get a sense of how we fit in. The next is the revolving door of the project mission. This is a big one. This is a 5-year program. And initially you have to submit a proposal with NSF in order to get this program approved. So with this, you may state a few things of what you want to accomplish in the initial mission of the program. But we also have to remember that the students come first in all of this. But logistically, things change. How do we meet the numbers that we initially said we were going to have in this program? How are we going to continue to fund if we run out of funding? Or we start with a curriculum and then we have to expand this curriculum because some classes may not be available. Some classes go away. As you know, in higher education, the curriculum can change. So with this, you kind of just have to really think quick on your feet and just adjust and adapt. An example of this, I will use the curriculum as an example. You may start out using core classes, but you only have a handful of electives. So for us, we only started out with maybe like 5 electives, but over the course of the years in the program, we ended up having maybe almost 10 electives because some classes were no longer available. We had to get permission from faculty. Can we include your classes into our curriculum? Students were interested in other classes and didn't necessarily want to take these electives because of the direction of their research. So you kind of have to adjust with what's going on. Another example of that is meeting your goals for numbers of students in your program. Yes, you initially said, for example, I'm going to have 10 students per year in this program. So by the end of this program, we'll have a total of 50 students. Well, by year 2, you realize, oh, I'm only at 12. Well, at year 2, you're supposed to be at 20. And these are things that you will have to discuss in your annual report that we submit every year for our grants. And talk about, well, what challenges did we have? How are we going to change this? What are we going to do different? And you kind of have to speak to those things and you have to adhere to those things, because in the next year's report, you have to talk about the previous challenge and how you overcome it with the mission. And finally, it's the transition to NRT, from NRT program coordinator to a traditional institution role. We are not typical program coordinators. Typically, a program coordinator has no decision making in some cases. They're not managing budgets. They're not facilitating recruitment sessions, or they're not facilitating orientations, or they're not facilitating advisory board meetings or faculty meetings. With this role, we do those things. And so it's like, where do you go to next? In some cases with academic program managers, you have to have a master's degree depending on the level of the program. It's different in some places. Some places require a PhD. I just have a bachelor's degree. But what I'm noticing the trend in higher ed is people are hiring more so on experience versus education, which is a good thing because some people who don't necessarily have the PhDs and masters will have that experience. And I'll use myself as the example. I have 10 plus years in higher education, but I just have the bachelor's. Do I want to continue my education? Yes, but it's not going to stop me. So this grant only lasts for 5 years. So you do know at some point, if this program doesn't become a permanent fixture on your campus, that you will be looking for employment in some other capacity. Some institutions will keep you and put you in another position, but you don't want to take a step back in your career when you've had so much exposure in somewhat of a leadership capacity in this role. So I would just recommend looking for jobs that are comparable to what you're doing. They may not be program coordinator. They may be program manager, assistant director, director, associate director, but there are other positions out there institutionally that fulfill the responsibilities in which you have previously done as being in the NRT. So those are the challenges with the NRT program coordinator. So if anyone has questions, now we can open the floor for questions for everyone.
Thank you, Nicole and Jyothi and Kristin and Sara and Toccara for that wonderful presentation. I'm going to open the floor up, just as Toccara said, to questions from our audience. Please feel free to either raise your hand or just pop your question in the chat, and then we'll hopefully get them answered. Maybe I'll start us off. Takara, I have a question based on something that you had said. I'm wondering, what examples do you guys have for successful implementation of these programs after the NRT funding has ended? And can you draw on any best practices from those examples?
So I will speak for us. So our program is a PhD healthcare robotics. It's an extension of the PhD robotics program. So we got approved to start an MS in robotics program because we had so much interest in this particular area of healthcare robotics, and we didn't have one. And so we also have a biorobotics certificate, which we have on campus that's staying now, because if students want to take that path of healthcare, they have an opportunity to have a curriculum that's focused mainly on that. And I think it's a good option. It's not a full program because it does require just the basic PhD robotics and its research. But surprisingly, a lot of our PhD students are working on things research-wise that's in that direction of healthcare. So I think that's a pretty successful thing. And I think the certificate, and we did have the certificate for those that were unfunded, that wanted that option, that they didn't want to go through the healthcare, or we can only allow a certain amount of students each year. And it actually has been really successful. One of our major courses that we offer is a clinical immersion class, where the students get the opportunity to go into the hospitals and, observe robotics cases, because robotic surgeries are happening now more so than before, and hospitals have these robotics departments. I think that speaks to how times are changing. In the last year, it's been a little difficult because of, the COVID situation, but students still get that experience. It's in the summer. They do 10 weeks, it's classroom, then they get mentors, not just in the hospitals. They've done some rehabilitative work with the Atlanta Hawks, gotten to go in and see some of those cases. We have relationships with all the major hospitals in Atlanta. That's Emory, Grady, Wellstar, you name it, they have access to that. So it can be successful. You just have to figure out, and that's the whole purpose of these grants, is just a plan to help you plant these programs into your institutions.
Thank you.
If I could add a little bit to that, a couple of things. So my program still has 2 more years, and there is a recognition that probably is not going to continue to exist in its current form. But some of the things that we have sort of established that we think will be products of this grant that will exist moving forward is that we've made it easier to have PhD students do not just interdisciplinary dual degrees, but also just sort of other disciplinary work, if not an actual full dual degree. And we've signed like a number of memoranda of understanding between different units that are actually across not just different programs, but different schools entirely within the university, so that they've agreed to how do we handle a student who wants to do an interdisciplinary program in each of our different schools, and establishing an agreement about having one integrated qualifying exam, and how to establish an interdisciplinary quals and advising committees, and that's a thing that is easier to do both in terms of just the sort of official documentation and forms, having had to tweak that to accommodate our program, but now everyone can use that. And having these memoranda of understanding if other students sort of want to follow the model going forward.
That's helpful. It sounds like in Tocara's example, there's sort of we're planting the seed and this is really going to take root, or it has taken root. And then for Kristin's, it sounds like there's been bits and pieces that you're taking cuttings from to continue the plant analogy here, but you're taking cuttings from and kind of planting them all around the institution. For those of you that are plant people. There's a couple of questions in the chat. The first one is from Gabriella Lee. She's wondering if it's possible to share position descriptions for program coordinators at your institutions. Looks like you guys prepared for that question, so that's awesome. Is that a request, Gabriella, and also for the group, is that something that you're looking for more examples of beyond just the 5 of you? Is that something that the InterReach community might be able to provide if they have examples?
I think because it was mentioned that the skill set of program coordinators is so varied and a little bit different than, let's say, standard, job descriptions maybe at each university. I thought that might be useful, especially like for new grants going in that just at the stage of proposal right now.
Okay, well, I can speak to that a little bit. So when coming into my program, the job description, it was a little vague. It didn't give all the information. It was a very general description of like a typical program coordinator. But then as I got into the role and, started speaking with my PI regularly, then it was like, oh, you have more responsibilities. I think the only question that they really asked me that made me go, this may be a little different, was, do you like to travel and how do you feel about speaking in front of large groups of people? And two things which I was okay with, but I didn't know the other aspects of that role and holding, maintaining information for our annual report, the assessments that we do. The assessments are a huge part of our program because you do these every year to find out what worked, what didn't work. And this all with the students and the faculty and some of the leadership, and you get that feedback. And then you kind of have to summarize that in your annual report and speak to those things. Even with like the traveling, like you think I'm just recruiting for my NRT, but you're also, like in my case, I'm traveling with other, I'm in 3 different departments. So I'm probably traveling with one of those departments, but I'm there if students are interested in those in our NRT program. So it's more than just planning meetings and, scheduling things and ordering supplies and typical things a program sometimes will do. It's a whole thing of like doing admissions interviews sometimes, recommending who should be admitted into your program. It's different, I guess, because they didn't really have a good idea of what the role would entail. It was just kind of, oh, this is a new duty as you go along. But you have to be kind of open-minded in these roles because it can change. And in my case, I'm full-time, but some people may not be full-time in this role. They may be part-time. So maybe one of the other girls can speak to that if they're not, their FTE is not full-time like I am. But hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yes, it does. And my kind of the reason for my asking for examples of job descriptions is because I think, that there should be obviously a good correlation between the skill set that's brought to the table by program coordinators and recognition by the program leadership of those skills, and then correlation with the level of the position and compensation, right? So because it is kind of at the intersection maybe of different job descriptions, I just don't want it to be shortchanged, right, in some ways. Thank you.
To add slightly to that, in addition to the person who had the job before me leaving because it needed to be a full-time position, also she didn't want to travel, and it was not clear that travel would be part of the job to go to the annual meeting. But then also we have a couple of sort of like summer school type exchange programs our students do with other institutions, which I also, if COVID wasn't a thing, would have gone on. And so that's one thing. But then also before this, I was assistant director of an office, a different office on campus. And honestly, a lot of the work that I do is very similar. The only difference between me being assistant director and me being a program coordinator in my day-to-day job is that I have slightly less decision-making authority, but like the actual things I work on are virtually the same. And I think my boss had some understanding of that, the head PI for the grant, and he really pushed before I was hired to get the pay to be increased. He was like, no, this is an important job that is more than a program coordinator. We want this other experience. We want, they need to be doing all of these things. You need to pay them more to attract what we want and get them to stay in the position for the duration of the grant. So
Exactly.
I would also add that this is something that we've worked on to inform the PIs prior to hiring the program coordinators. And so when we last year worked with NSF to do a presentation to say, hey, this is what this job looks like, so that they can have a background of understanding what all the different roles, and that's obviously an ongoing process to making sure that the new PIs have more of an understanding that the job description might be ambiguous, but here's what many of us are doing in our particular roles. And so I know that's documentation that is available that the PCs have developed.
And I think I just want to chime in. So that's also our attempt for writing up this publication, is to define the kind of the nuances of each different hats that we wear. It sounds like there's 9 different hats, but each of those roles are very intricate, and we continue to evolve as the program evolves. And we hope that these terminologies and hats kind of catch on, because hopefully that'll provide a much better description than what typically you see in a program coordinator's job ad.
This is an excellent conversation. I'm gonna just elevate a question from Shana or Shanna. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Mick Alexander, oh my gosh, who is also a program coordinator at Duke. So I would love to connect with you, Shana. She wants to know, do you all know of program coordinators who jump to new NRTs within or across institution after the funding ends, which kind of relates back to our question about plants. So, yeah, do you guys know any like that?
You saying the ones that have jumped from one NRT to another?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That might be a good transition for Nicole to.
Yeah.
Do you mean like in terms of, your NRT is ending, how do you take on a new role transitioning? So I believe, and Sarah, sorry, I'm going to throw this back to you a little bit. I believe you've been approached, haven't you, about new PIs looking for a program coordinator and kind of sending out to us, knowing that we meet, once a month, saying, is anyone looking for a job? Like, is anyone, looking to transition to a new one? So I don't think I'm making that up. Sarah, correct me here.
No, you're absolutely right. And, because we built this community and my institution, obviously being a program coordinator, I was approached when there was a new NRT that was coming on, like, hey, can you help us find the right person or help us with a job description? That was also really important because informing them of what all consists of this role. So, and Nicole and I both, and there's other program coordinators who still kind of are engaged in this, in the group, but have found other opportunities. And so for my position currently, I'm no longer, our NRT is done, sad, but have found other opportunities at the institution. And so currently I do work with the vice president for research and partnerships but the skills that I've learned and we're doing as a program coordinator has highly benefited me knowing the different departments. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity that once you've built that community, as I mentioned, at the university, to finding other avenues to continue on if you wanted to stay. But obviously new program coordinators are being hired all the time with new NRTs being funded. So there are those possibilities as well.
And I'll just piggyback off of that. Specifically with our MS and robotics program, it's not NRT funded, but I am the interim academic program coordinator. And mainly because I have the experience with working with NRTs, and they're really trying to mirror that with what we've done with our NRT program. So there are opportunities, and I have been presented with that opportunity to take this on in a permanent capacity. But going from, I try to tell people that going from a grant to becoming, an actual employee of the institution at the hands of the institution, some things may change behind scenes logistically, but it's pretty much the same thing. Luckily for me, it's the same role, and I'm able to use my, my resources and my tools that I've used for my NRT and just transition them over to the master's program. So there are these programs really work when you plant them and try to do other things with them in some cases. And there are other opportunities within your institution for the future.
Thanks all on that. I think it's an unusual situation to have someone with so much responsibility and having such a pivotal role in a program also on soft money, not really knowing what they're going to do in 3 years' time. So it's interesting dynamic. Thanks for that.
A lot of great conversation happening in the chat. Christine Hendren is wondering about how you guys came up with the names and definitions for the categories of roles and the components, and what, if any, impacts have you seen in how program coordinator contributions are understood broadly after having implemented this naming convention?
So we would like to publish this so that we can really get that naming convention out there. So if anyone has suggestions for a journal that would be look upon us, positively, that would be great. Honestly, we did try to publish it in one magazine for higher education, and they just didn't get it, which is kind of the point, right? That no one gets our jobs. So no one gets the publication aspect either. But we would love to share this more broadly so that people can use it, in any way they need to. The naming convention was really just based on writing what it is that we do and trying to categorize it as best as possible, then kind of taking a step back and saying, well, if you had to put a label on it, what label would it be? And so this is kind of what we came to. I will say that the forecaster, we initially called it the fortune teller, but we thought that might be kind of a negative way of viewing it. So we thought forecaster was more positive, because you really do have to kind of look into the future far, and see as best you can what might be an upcoming needed change. So that's where those came from.
Great, and it looks like Gabriella is suggesting maybe the Journal of Research Administration, possibly. If others have suggestions, please feel free to name them or put them in the chat. That would be great. I think maybe we have time for one more question. Let's see, I have to scroll back up. Heather had asked about how the transition to remote affected or changed any of your definitions and or roles.
I would like to chime in for that. This is something that I was talking to whenever I talk to people who are not coordinators outside of our job. And I was telling them a lot of components did not change. People still need to get paid. People still need to take courses. People still need to go through everything that is part of the program. Yes, we do make concessions with, how rigorous we are with some of the components, but the budgeting and the rest of it doesn't really change because people's livelihoods depend on these fellowships, and we can't. There's no break. So and it really didn't change much. And with the curriculum aspect, all three of our courses are pretty easy to adapt in a remote setting. And this was also the feedback that we got from the trainees. They're like, oh, all these courses are really easy. It was hard, and they were trying hard to feel motivated to be in class because, everything is remote. And I think everyone is feeling this Zoom fatigue. But collectively, it has not been that hard to transition.
I would say the main sort of pro and con to my mind is our program has a lot of colloquia as part of it. And, so there was a little bit of having to change that around, especially initially. We had to cancel 2 of them before we transitioned to doing things online. And in some ways that makes my life a lot easier because I don't have to arrange travel and accommodation for our guests. But the sort of main drawback for me is just losing the accessibility to students. And, of course, anytime we do have a Zoom event, I say, I'm here for you, please, let me know if you have any questions or concerns or whatever. But it was really nice when, they all knew where my office was and it was very close to their space where they had to work together. And a lot of them utilized that space and liked working in it and then could step down the hallway and talk to me. And those sort of informal conversations felt really important to maintaining sort of a sense of connection to the students. Yes, I'm still accessible, but not in the same sort of informal way. I got one email from a student that was like, normally this is the sort of thing I'd only pop into your office about, but I can't do that right now. And so it sort of elevated what he wanted to be just a little casual conversation to something that felt a little bit more formal. And we had to find a time to Zoom and, create a Zoom link for it. And so I miss sort of feeling a little bit more, not quite social, but a little bit with the students in the program. Instead of just feeling like I'm always being I need this thing from you, and I need, in addition to saying, requirements and expectations of the program, I also sort of got to feel friendly with them. And now it kind of felt a little bit like I'm just communicating things I need from them.
Yeah,
Kristen,
and just to
this is Heather.
quickly
Oh, sorry.
piggyback, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. This is Heather who asked it, but go ahead. I just had something to follow up.
And so just to piggyback off of what Kristin said with the student, I think the largest transition for me was the student engagement. So I just engaged more. And this is having our meetings, you have to move those virtually because we had monthly meetings, and the students really didn't bother me too much unless it wasn't they got paid or they're trying to register for classes. But we have monthly meetings and we move those online, but I took it a step further and decided to do one-on-one meetings with each student because I'm a huge advocate for mental health, and I'm a huge student affairs person, mainly my background. So it was just engaging with them more to say, I'm more available to you. And I had a small group of students. So it wasn't 60 people had my cell phone number. It was text me. I don't look at my email every day, but text me if you need something. Or do you want to talk about this? Or if it's safe for this. So you kind of have to find ways so you don't lose the student, because, you know, a couple of them wanted to drop out, but it's like, no, how do I keep them engaged? So you have to do more things to keep them engaged in the program during this time. So I think we did a good job as a program to keep them engaged by doing those extra things, but it was more time consuming, but it worked.
Yeah, and I think that's what my question was, more about the engagement, not just with the students, but also we have faculty mentors. And I don't know which one is a little more challenging, which group, but to bring everyone together every now and then, yes, that works. But yes, you miss the ongoing interactions, pop into a faculty member's office, or even my PIs, you know, with everyone remote. So I think it was more asking, did you have to add to a lot of these definitions? Because then that remote coordinating is completely different than just, you know, being able to coordinate people on a campus, which is challenging in itself. So, but especially when you're working interdisciplinary. And I think this could just be a whole new webinar, maybe. Maybe I'm making a suggestion for just.
One of the things that my NRT has is, and the students created it, a Slack channel that they communicate with each other on, and they have, you know, occasional movie nights and stuff amongst themselves that they've transitioned to online. So they have a lot of, I forget what they're called, like threads within the channel that are only accessible to them. But then they have a couple where they've added me and the faculty and whatever. And so they'll reach us there, and I can of course private message them on that as well. And that's another thing that feels more informal, that has not just everybody in it, but can also have individual messages.
Yeah, we have a WhatsApp, and we have, I actually created a 24-hour Zoom where nobody's allowed to go in except for the fellows. I have no idea even when they're accessing it and all that. So yeah, I know they get together and so forth. And maybe it is more coordinating with, you know, faculty and our network. So one of the definitions had included being the network. I don't remember what the word was, not hub, but that in itself can be challenging. And then to connect the students within that network. So yeah.
All right. Thank you guys so much for this really wonderful presentation and for the very engaging discussion that followed. So we are recording this webinar, and we will be posting it to our website. And it sounds like, based on Sarah's messages in the chat, that you guys will also post it through your Slack channel maybe, or another outlet that you guys have to connect with your community. And I also just want to share with the entire group our upcoming webinar. It's coming in the chat, so you can navigate to that webpage, interreach.org/upcoming webinars, and you can see what's coming up for the next few months. We have an entire series on facilitation. So I hope that those of you that joined us from the NRT community, I hope you find some interesting topics that you'll join us for, and maybe we can create some opportunities for cross-pollination between our communities. So thank you again, and thank you to all of our audience members and discussants. It was great to have you all. We'll see you next month. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Christine.
Thank you.